A mixing box reduces contamination and improves safety.
Hi friends, I'm going to talk about mixing boxes, how to make one, and how to use it safely.
The style of dye mixing box that I create in this video is not intended for regular use in a professional dye studio. These disposable mixing boxes are intended for use by hobby dyers or as temporary equipment in an art studio or costume dye shop.
I have my dye mixing box here. This is just a plain blue apron box that I've cut one end off of and the top flaps and secured it down. And I've got a pile of disposable paper in here. You can just get a free paper and cut it up into sheets that line the bottom of these dye mixing boxes. So the first thing that you do when you're working with a dye that you need to use in a mixing box is put on nitrile gloves. So I have a pair here. I have my gloves on. And I also have a mask.
Regarding masks as PPE, different classes of dye have different sized particulates, so check the safety data sheet for the type of dye you are mixing to determine the type of PPE needed for your respiratory protection.
Before I use this, I want to take a water mister and spray all three sides and the floor. You don't really need to hose it down, you just need water to be in there. Obviously a fake dye container. When I put my dye container in there and scoop into the dry dye, any particles that get airborne, they're not going to go very far. So the water on these surfaces gives those airborne dye particles something to cling to and dissolve into. In a time when we aren't having a pandemic, this would just be a standard particle mask. But so I'm going to put on my cloth mask so that when I open this container, and I scoop into it, anything that's airborne that comes out the front is blocked by my mask.
Follow the directions provided by the manufacturer on how to mix your dye powder into solution.
And then once you've got your dye into your pot, you put the lid back on your dye. You can take your dye and put it back on the shelf. And then you take your sheet. I like to crumple it up, take my gloves off into one little packet, and then throw this whole thing in the garbage. You don't have to do it that way. It's just efficient, so I do it. That's how you use a mixing box to minimize dye stuff contamination in an airborne context. If you find yourself working at a dye facility where there is no mixing box, obviously you can make one of these quite quickly from a cardboard box and some newsprint or packing paper that you have lying around.
To reiterate, these boxes are not intended to be permanent safety equipment in a professional dyeing facility. They're a helpful temporary resource while you acquire and install a sturdier option like this plexiglass and plywood mixing station. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and hit the bell for notification of new content. Please join me each Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern for my live studio stream.